Let me just check that you guys can hear me properly. Um, Raise your little hand if you can hear me properly. I'd appreciate it. Okay, great. I'm a little bit under the weather. I think I have a cold. Actually, I know I have a cold. Maybe I have COVID. Who knows? But anyway, we're going to try to get through this. By the way, hang on a second. You should be seeing, let me just fix this real quick. You guys should be seeing um, what you call it? Uh, what is going on? There seems to be a problem with my ability to share my screen. There we go. And something's going on with the webinar software, so you're going to have to forgive me. Uh, Before we get started, I'm going to put everybody's hands down. I just want to check something real quick on the audio seems to be working now fine. Okay, fine. Who knows? Now, just to confirm that you guys can see the same screen that I have, it should say a purple background that says death rates, vaccines, and common sense. If you can see that, please raise your hand. And I put the comma in the wrong place. That's stupid of me. Hold on, just because I'm a little bit autistic, I'm going to fix this real quick because, see, if you put the comma in the wrong place, God doesn't let you go into heaven. That's how it works. Yeah, some of you don't know that, but it's true. If you put the wrong comma in the wrong place, you will not get to heaven. So you have to be absolutely sure, positively sure, that you're showing like the right goddamn comma. So anyway, there it is. The topic that we're going to be discussing today is obviously death rates, vaccines, and common sense. It's all about the COVID-19 pandemic, so-called pandemic. Now, this is a very good moment to discuss this whole situation because we have come to the end of this year, 2020. We're starting 2021, which is going to be, I think it's not going to be that bad initially, though I think it'll get worse as the year progresses, but that's for another webinar. The point I wanted to discuss here is I want to look at the number of dead people that we have had over the past year, the FDA's report on the COVID vaccine, and tie this all together with some common sense observations, some observations that I think are fairly reasonable and essentially point to the fact that this whole lockdown, masks, social distancing has all been a complete and utter waste of time. I'm going to also highlight some issues that led me initially to panic back in March. As you all remember, I think quite clearly that I was freaking the fuck out back in March when this was coming out, February, March. And now, with more data, it's quite obvious that I was sorely mistaken. And more to the point, the authorities are sorely mistaken. But they seem to be continuing in their error. I mean, in my defense, once I realized that I had panicked and that the world was not ending, this wasn't like airborne Ebola as I thought initially. Well, I changed my mind. But the problem is that a lot of the authorities are not changing their minds. They're continuing on with this notion that this is the worst thing since the bubonic plague, when it clearly is not. And so, anyway, let's get started. I mean, let's get started and let's go to the numbers because the numbers don't lie. Now, as I get started in this presentation, I want to make it really, really clear that I'm using the World Health Organization, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Center for Disease Control numbers. I am not questioning their numbers. This is important, by the way. Okay. Why is it important? Because I think a lot of people justifiably have questioned the numbers. The numbers that have been thrown around as to the lethality of this disease, the actual number of cases, and whatnot, they've questioned those numbers, and it's been a justified questioning of those numbers, but because of it, the people who insist on vaccines and lockdowns and all the rest of it, of treating this COVID, disease as if it were the end of the world, well, they're able to point to all those people who are questioning the numbers and call them conspiracy theorists. So in this presentation, I am not questioning any number. I am going by the numbers that they are presenting. And by going with the numbers that they are presenting, you will quickly see, it seems to me, I think, that this has all been overblown. It's been severely overblown. So anyway, let's get started. The death rates. It's always important to know how many people actually die before you start saying, oh my God, there's like 1 million people who have died. Hmm? Uh, uh, because, people die all the time. It's perfectly normal. I mean, people don't live forever. It would be lovely if they did, but they don't. They die. And the total worldwide deaths for 2019 were 58.4 million. 10 years before that, it was 54.4. 10 years before that, it was 52.5. 10 years before that, back in 1989, it was 49 million even. These are rough numbers, okay? I'm rounding up to the nearest 100,000. But that's roughly the number of people who die in any given year. In the year 2019, 58.4 million people died of all causes: accidents, old age, heart attack, cancer, whatever the cause. That's the number of people who died. And because we live in a fairly advanced civilization at this point, there isn't any blind spot. Okay, this is pretty much the accurate numbers. Now, worldwide, the total number of COVID deaths, as reported by the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control, is 1.8 million. Now, a lot of people have questioned this number. I am not questioning it. A lot of people have said that, somebody gets hit by a bus and he happened to have COVID in his system. Oh, he died of COVID. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just going by the WHO's number and the CDC's number. Okay? 1.8 million people have died so far in the year 2020 from COVID. Okay? Whether they were hit by a bus and happened to have it in their system, or whether they died in agony and at some ICU with their lungs filled with water from pneumonia caused by COVID-19, I don't care. 1.8 million is the number. Now, the World Health Organization further states, and these are taken straight from their website, by the way. You can go there, and later when I post the recording, I'll post links to those websites. The World Health Organization numbers for COVID are 83.3 million people confirmed COVID cases. A lot of conspiracy theorists, or a lot of reasonable people, not conspiracy theorists, just people who are just reasonable and know more or less what they're talking about, are saying, well, a lot of these are false positives. A lot of these tests are not accurate. And I say, I could give a shit. The World Health Organization says 83.3 million people have had confirmed COVID cases, and I'm taking them at their word. I am not debating that. The World Health Organization further states that 63 million of those 83 million cases have been resolved. Resolved meaning that the patient either fully recovered or died. That's a resolved COVID case. Okay, 63 million. Now, 1.8 million out of 63 million cases, the resolved cases, right? Because I mean, a resolved case by definition is either the patient got better or he's dead, but he no longer suffers from the disease, right? So of those 63 million, 1.8 million people died. Ergo, that is a 2.85% mortality rate. It's under 3%. That's the mortality rate. These are WHO numbers, World Health Organization numbers. I am not questioning whether the people who had COVID had other things and died of other things. No. I'm not questioning whether the tests are accurate or inaccurate, or they give false positive, and what percentage of the cases claim to have COVID are actually false positive. I'm not making such a statement at all. I'm going by their numbers, the WHO's numbers. I'm not questioning those numbers. And based on those numbers, the mortality is 2.85%. Now, we have had this thing going on since March up until December. Of course, there were cases in China back in January and potentially in December of 2019, but that doesn't matter. Insofar as the numbers that the WHO has, 63 million cases were resolved, and of those, 1.8 million died. That's 2.85% mortality. You don't believe me? Check my math. Okay? Now look at that number, 2.8% mortality. That means 1 in 33 people, less than 1 in 33 people, will die of COVID if they get it. It doesn't matter their age or whatever. Just looking at it, without making any kind of distinction. 1 in 33 people will die of this disease. To contrast, people who get Ebola, 40% die. Yeah. Of the 100% of Ebola cases that are resolved, either they get better or they die, 40% die. Okay? So Ebola has, roughly a 30 times more lethal, 13.3%, 13 times more lethal than COVID. Sorry about that. So this is the mortality that we're talking about, okay? And of course, when you start looking at the different demographics, the different age cohorts, you start to realize, of course, that the mortality is significantly lower for children and young people. There are, of course, young people and even children who have died of COVID-19. And there are even young people, so far no children, who have died of COVID-19 who were healthy, okay? I mean, they were healthy young people in their early 20s. They had everything going for them. They weren't overweight. They didn't have any kind of heart problem or anything of the sort, and they died. But those cases are exceptionally rare. They're so exceptional that it doesn't even rate a percentage. Whereas older people, elderly people, do tend to die. And in fact, when you start looking at the average age of the people who have died, it tends to be the average tends to be pretty high up there. But I'm not going to go into that because there's a lot of debate about those numbers, and so I don't want to get into a debate of the numbers. I want to take the least controversial numbers, and the least controversial numbers tell us that only 2.85% of the people who get it will die, which is not exceptionally low, but it's low. Okay? Now, let's turn to the vaccine. There's been a lot of talk about the vaccine, but also there's been a lot of investigations and studies of this and that, the other. There have been so many investigations and studies that the waters have been irretrievably muddied. They are so muddied that you can't figure out what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's false, what's bullshit and what's wishful thinking. Okay? You can't. And from both sides, by the way. All sides are trying to muddy their waters because they all have, they are all trying to politicize and weaponize the science. So I figured that if we're going to talk about the science, let's go to the FDA report on the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. Now, this report, which I linked previously, you could have downloaded it. The key passages for me are on page 29 and 30. Okay. Now, to give you a breakdown of this report, a précis of it, they used 36,500 participants. Roughly half of them took the vaccine, took 2 doses of it, and roughly half of them took placebos, 2 doses. Again, the placebo, if you don't know, a placebo is basically distilled water that is given to a patient rather than the actual vaccine. And they are told that they are getting the vaccine. And this is standard scientific practice to study a vaccine or to study a whole host of other things, because a lot of times there is a so-called placebo effect. A person takes a medication, even though it's just water or just a sugar pill, and because of it, they seem to feel better. And it's a known effect. And so half were given the vaccine, half took the placebo. Now, the evaluation of both groups, first of all, the groups were randomized in terms of age, in terms of weight and general health and all the rest of it, and they were treated identically, and they were evaluated identically. And all the evaluations were based on objective criteria. For instance, when they said that somebody had a serious COVID case, that was based on their oxygenation, I can't say the fucking word, levels, but you know what I'm talking about, okay? Um, and so all of that was objectively measured so that there was no discrepancy in the data. Because though there have been literally thousands of other analyses of data and whatnot, the data is mix and match, comparing apples to oranges. In fact, the FDA report on the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is actually, and shockingly, the first large-scale study that treated everybody the same in order to get at some sensible measures. Now, the report from the FDA, okay, not me, not some group, some nonprofit organization of the left or the right, no, the FDA. And whether you think that the FDA is politically biased or not doesn't matter. It's the recognized government authority. Of the vaccinated case in the FDA report, only 8 tested positive for COVID 7 days after the second dose. By the way, the second dose was given 14 days after the first dose, i.e., the whole trial was basically 21 days after the first dose of the vaccine or the placebo. 8 people tested positive for COVID, which is a very good number. I mean, 8 out of 18,000, that's, nothing, right? 8 tested positive after the second dose, and only 1 had a severe case, but did not require hospitalization. A severe case in this regard meant that the person had an oxygen level of 92%. And they had fever and discomfort, but not enough to merit hospitalization, and the patient recovered. So, that was that. Excuse me a moment, please. The ultimate irony that I have a cold. It would be so awesomely righteous if I actually did get COVID-19 right now, though I hope I don't die, and if I do die, well, it was nice knowing you all. Anyway, before I die, let me just finish with this webinar. And by the way, parenthetically, I'm so sorry I couldn't do it on Sunday. I had a personal issue that popped up, very annoying, but of trivial importance, but it made it impossible for me to do the webinar on Sunday. And Monday, I already scheduled some activities. And so because of it, I couldn't do it on Monday. I'm so sorry to have done it today, and I hope it didn't inconvenience you. So there you go. Anyway, going back to this. Of the vaccinated cases, 8 tested positive, only 1 had a severe case. Right? Right. All good. Of the placebo cases, 162 tested positive for COVID after 21 days or earlier after the initial dose of the placebo. But of those 162 tested positive, only 3 had severe cases, and only 2 required hospitalization. And by the way, of the 2 who required hospitalization, one of them had a severe comorbidity. He probably would have wound up in the hospital anyway because of this comorbidity, but that's irrelevant. Let's treat it prima facie as 162 tested positive, 3 had severe cases, and of those 3 severe cases, 2 had to go to the hospital. Okay, so comparing the placebo cases to the vaccinated cases, well, it's quite obvious that the vaccinated were those who took the vaccine were 95% more likely not to get it, right? That's fantastic. But if you look at the 162 tested positive for COVID, out of the total population of 18.3 thousand, that is less than 1%. Let that sink in. This is the best study so far. And 21 days after the initial examination and the dosage of the placebo or the vaccine, Those who took the placebo had less than a 1% chance of contracting COVID and a vanishingly small chance of actually developing a severe case. And literally, if only 2 out of 18,000 required hospitalization, that's 1 in 9,000 chance of requiring going to the hospital. And here's the kicker: nobody died in neither group, neither the ones who took the vaccine or the ones who took the placebo. None of them died. Now, there's the other issue, of course, is that a lot of the people who took the vaccine suffered side effects. And the data from my read seems a little bit contradictory in the report. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want anybody to accuse me of any kind of fear mongering. But read it for yourself. It seems a little contradictory. The side effects. And by definition, the people who took a placebo had no side effects. And so the obvious question that has to arise is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because however you look at it, the chances of getting COVID are vanishingly small. The chances of you requiring hospitalization, whether you take the vaccine or not, are even smaller. And this is the gold standard of COVID studies. Okay? Okay, so let's move on to some anecdotal observations. Safety protocols, mask, social distancing, and whatnot, are being implemented in contradictory ways, and I don't think that anybody disputes this. For instance, at restaurants, they are closing restaurants or imposing these ridiculous social distancing measures where you have to have like plastic screens between tables, but people are allowed to hop on airplanes, no problem. All they have to do is wear a stupid mask. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, you are physically far closer to a person on an airplane and for a much longer period of time than you are at a restaurant. I mean, at a restaurant, at most you'll be at a table for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, right? And therefore your chances of being stuck with somebody else next to you in some other table is 90 minutes to 120 minutes tops. Okay. Whereas on a plane, well, most flights last at least 90 minutes or else you drive, right? I mean, what's the point of being on a flight that's that short? You're going to be on a plane for a couple of hours at least, and you're going to be in such incredibly close quarters. So what exactly is the point? Okay. And that's just one anecdotal observation. Another anecdotal observation: politicians and other people with privileged information are not following safety protocols, masks and social distancing and the rest of it. They are encouraging other people to do so, but they themselves are not. They and their families are not. They get together with their friends without any kind of masks or any kind of social distancing, and it's all hunky dory. But they tell everybody, wear the mask, social distancing, stay in your home, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. I mean, there's some woman, some government official, I forget where, who was insisting everybody go on lockdown, and she was like partying hardy in like Puerto Rico or the Caribbean or something like that, and posted it onto her Instagram, for crying out loud. I forget what it was, the specifics of it. You'll look it up, but I mean, you look it up, and it's not just the one politician; it's like a whole bunch of people. Okay, none of the politicians, none of the people who have privileged information are really following any of this bullshit. And that's pretty obvious. Okay, now, third anecdotal observation. This is just me just like pointing stuff out. I'm not saying anything. Over half of German healthcare workers refuse to take the vaccine. This is happening now, and it's becoming an issue in Germany. I mean, the government is really cracking down on the healthcare workers, and the healthcare workers are having none of it. They're like, fuck you, we're not going to take the vaccine, which means either one of two things. Either they don't believe that COVID is that serious, or they don't trust the safety of the vaccine, or possibly a combination thereof, in the sense that they figure that the risks of the vaccine are greater than the risks of contracting COVID. This is becoming an issue in Germany. And in fact, a lot of other countries, a lot of other states in the United States, it's becoming an issue too. And to talk more about healthcare workers, because of COVID, a lot of so-called non-essential treatments were postponed. This is causing a lot of problems because a lot of people are dying. You know, heart disease, cancers, whatnot. People who would have been treated otherwise with chemotherapy or heart surgery of this, that, or the other sort, they're being treated as if their diseases were, they could be postponed. And these people, because of their treatments being postponed, they're dying, which is a disaster, it seems to me. Yeah. But be that as it may, the rationale was these people's treatment would be postponed because the healthcare workers would be so overwhelmed with COVID cases that they would not be able to treat these less serious, less urgent matters. So that was the rationale. But see, oops, I forgot to complete it. But I'm going to just do that real quick because, again, I'm autistic. Um, if you notice that the healthcare workers have all the time in the world to do TikTok videos, to do TikTok videos, which I, for one, find really just despicable, and I'm sure you do too, that they are, um, I mean, come on, you see these videos of healthcare workers, right? And very sophisticated choreography. It takes a long time to do that, to plan that, i.e., they have all the time in the fucking world to do that shit. Mm? And you see it all the time. It's not like sporadic thing. And it's only started during COVID. I mean, back in 2019, had you ever even heard of healthcare workers doing TikTok videos? No. Why? Because they were fucking busy. But because of this postponement of quote unquote non urgent or low priority maladies, these people have all the fucking time in the world. Huh? Yeah, I thought so. Okay, so from all this information, we can come up with some common sense inferences, okay, of the abductive, deductive, and inductive sort. First of all, COVID exists. Anybody who says otherwise is just a fucking idiot. It exists, but it is nowhere near as serious as advertised. Now, how do I come to that inference from the FDA report of the vaccine? It's just not that serious. I mean, of the people who took a placebo, only 2 out of 18,000 required hospitalization. It's actually kind of interesting because out of the 36,500 people who participated in the study, who took the vaccine or took the placebo, none of them died. Now, in the United States, there has been roughly reported, and again, I'm going by CDC numbers. I'm not making anything up or questioning any data. The CDC numbers say that in 2020, something like 320,000 Americans died of COVID-19. That is roughly 1 in 1,000 Americans. Therefore, out of the 36,500 participants who were all Americans and they were all randomized, you would figure that 36, i.e., 1 in 1,000, would have died, right? Or let me rephrase that. If you're saying 18,000 took the placebo and 18,000 took the vaccine, well then, 1 in 1,000 who took the placebo, i.e., didn't get any treatment, 18 should have died of the placebo group, at least, right? Or around that number, 1 in 1,000. And of the vaccines number, well, we would have seen how effective the vaccine would have been in preventing deaths. But out of the 36,500 participants, which is not an insignificant number for a scientific test, none of them died. None of them. Now that, to me, is significant. Okay, let's move on. Early Chinese information emerged from the censorship, because China is a censored nation. Let's never forget that. Government censored, not private censored like in the US or in Europe. The early Chinese information that emerged from censorship focused on exceptionally catastrophic cases, leading to the false inference that such catastrophic cases were widespread. That's the inference that I've arrived at, and I think that I personally fell for that because I saw these cases, and you remember those cases back in January and February, where you'd have like these people on gurneys in a hospital, like fucking going to seizures and shit, right? And all these people in hazmat suits going around soldering shut apartment buildings. And you're like, holy shit, what the fuck do these people have, right? And retrospectively, it seems pretty clear that these anecdotal cases, uh, severe though they were, I mean, I'm not doubting that any of that shit was made up. I think it was real. But I think what happened was that it led us to the false inference that that was widespread rather than very, very specific cases, exceptional cases. And I'll give you another example. See, I'm addicted to crash videos on YouTube. This is true, by the way. I watch a lot of motorcycle crash videos, quite frankly, to both scare myself and to study the accidents. Scare myself so that I always respect the fact that I'm on a motorcycle and it's dangerous, number one, and learn so that I can see what somebody else is doing and not make the same mistake. Because they say that the definition of a wise man is to learn from others' mistakes. That's why I watch these videos. And on YouTube, there are tons of these videos, right? And you Google the kind of motorcycle that I have, or you go on YouTube and search for the kind of motorcycle I have. I have several, but the one I'm most concerned about is the BMW R1200 GS or GS Adventure, which is the big bike, right? And you'll get like a dozen of those videos of people crashing in those things, right? But the thing is, you see those videos and you figure, oh man, all these drivers, all these riders of these bikes, they crash all the time. And of course not. Crashing on a GS is incredibly rare, okay? Because the kind of guys who ride it and all the rest of it, they tend to be middle-aged, they tend to be more cautious. The people who crash on the bike are very few and far between, but you go on YouTube and you see all these videos one after the other, and you get the false inference that, oh my God, all these guys riding GSs are fucking insane and crash all the time, which is not the case. You see? So similar false inference seems to have occurred, at least to me, and I think to a lot of other people, who thought that this shit was Ebola, aerosoled Ebola. I mean, a shit that could like spread in the air and kill you dead and kill by the boatload. And the fact that the Chinese censored so much of the information, it seems to me, added to the sense of panic. And I think that that initial panic has just kept on going. Okay. And I think that what's happened is that so many people have refused to actually look at the data. And more to the point, since there are so many people peddling different kinds of data, comparing apples to oranges, and also, quite frankly, a lot of people on all sides who don't know what the fuck they're talking about and don't have the humility to look at the data carefully and cautiously, well, it's pushing false narratives on all sides, and it's keeping us in a state of hysteria without actually looking at what's going on. See? Another common sense inference. The low lethality of COVID does not justify the damage done to the global economy. I think that we can all agree on that one. Okay. Although, of course, there are people who are COVID diehards who think that the only way that the economy can ever be reopened is if COVID is eliminated completely, which is insane and impossible, of course. Those people are hysterics. Yeah. But I think that anybody sensible and not hysterical will recognize that, yeah, the deaths, tragic, awful, no question. Is it worth crashing the entire economy, the entire global economy over this shit? No, no way. And it was a mistake. Okay. Um, Now, finally, was the lockdown and other measures implemented for political reasons? Specifically, were these measures implemented in order to damage political opponents? I think that that's yes. I think that a lot of issues that happened in 2020 were to damage Donald Trump, damage the economy that Donald Trump was overseeing. It's not Trump's economy, by the way. He just happened to be at the helm when the economy was doing fairly well until it crashed because of this shit. And I think a lot of people on the opposition party saw the lockdown that would crash the economy as a political opportunity and pushed for it. I think that what is happening now in against the United Kingdom with the emergence of the so-called British variant, which is just so much bullshit, I think it's just a way for the European Union to punish Britain even more for successfully exiting the European Union. I think it's just a punitive measure. And I think that it's just all bullshit, that there is no British variant that is more lethal or some shit like that, justifying the fact that British people can no longer travel to the European Union. I think it's just a punitive measure just to make Britain suffer. Yeah. I mean, think about it. It seems like something that that would be implemented for political revenge. Hmm? I mean, look at the lethality of this shit. It's not that terrible. There's also something else that's going on, which is very, very interesting. I'm not that I didn't include here in my outline. See, a lot of people are confusing cases with deaths. Ultimately, do you know how many cases there are going to be of COVID-19? 7.7 billion. That's the number of people in the world. Eventually, this shit is going to spread around the world, and there's nothing to stop it. See, the number of people who have COVID is not the question. The question is how many people are dying. That's the question. Nobody, it does not matter how many people have it. I'm pretty sure that my two small children have it and have had it for quite a while now. Okay. I, as I've said before, I suspect that I got it in March and I got it from my kids. My son felt a little bit off for like 2 days, but not even enough to stop him from playing and shit. My daughter was a little bit under the weather for 2 or 3 days, but like not no big deal, no fever. She was just like lethargic, a little bit of snot, that kind of thing. And I myself in March, I had a few nights, a couple of nights where I was like excessively sweating at night, and that's usually an indication that I had a fever during the night. Um, and I was for like 2 weeks, I felt kind of like you know, and I'd been traveling to a whole number of international airports. In fact, I'd been to like 5 or 6 in a 1 month period before I got this. So I suspected that we all had it in back in March. Okay. Uh, um, but the point is of this is that of course we all have it, but so what? None of us died. None of us even went to the hospital, and we didn't even go to a doctor for crying out loud. It just passed, and that was that. Jeremy Clarkson, the guy from Top Gear, you know, he said something like, "Yeah, I'm not battling COVID. I'm just lying in bed and waiting for it to pass, and I'm feeling, I felt a little bit miserable, but now I'm feeling better, and soon enough it'll be gone." Yeah, exactly. It's just a fucking flu. It's more serious for some people, but it's not the end of the world. Oh, and by the way, something else that's happening. Finally, some government organizations in the West are starting to say, oh, yeah, it looks like this is probably developed in some lab somewhere in China. Finally, people knew this shit back in March. The autists over on 4chan had deduced and inferred exactly which lab had created this shit. A lab that was subsequently demolished by the Chinese government, right? Suspiciously so. And now, 10 months later, they're saying, oh, yeah, it was probably made in a lab somewhere, fucking retards. But anyway, um, the point of this entire presentation, I, uh, I've been very adamant here in this presentation of not questioning any numbers, because that is the way that people who are opposed to common sense measures nullify the naysayers. Okay? In other words, if you start questioning the numbers, they say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist because you don't believe in the WHO's numbers. Oh, you're a crazy right winger because you don't believe in the CDC and you don't believe in the test. In order to convince normies, you don't question the numbers. You take the numbers at face value, as I've done here, and you point out the obvious. It's not that big of a deal. A lot of people as of late have been questioning the mortality rate, the percentage mortality rate. How lethal is this shit, or how lethal compared to previous years? It doesn't matter. Okay, all you have to do is look at the number of total deaths and look at the number of deaths from COVID. In 2019, it was 58.4 million. Assume, just for the sake of argument, that the totality of the 1.8 million COVID deaths is, number one, an accurate number, and number two, you just add it on top. How much more deaths is that? Well, if you do the math, it's about 3%. 3% more people died, which is a tragedy for those people, sure, but it's not the end of the world. Certainly not enough to, close the world up. My thinking at this time, after this whole 10-month odyssey of this shit, okay, where I admit I completely lost my shit initially, because initially, from the reports that were coming out of China, that were being smuggled out of China, this shit looked like Ebola. I mean, come on, you guys remember that I, uh, bought myself a food supply, and I was seriously looking into how I could illegally purchase a ventilator for my family, thinking that if this shit gets that fucking bad, I want to have access to a ventilator so that my kids and family will survive this shit. I'm not kidding, and I don't have a problem admitting to it after the fact that back in March, I made serious inquiries as to how to buy from a hospital a ventilator. Yeah. Of course, I didn't advertise it at the time. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody publicly. But yeah, and I had already budgeted that I was willing to go up to 25,000 if need be. And even at that time, I was thinking to myself, man, how much is the life of my kid worth? Fuck it, I'll lay it all on the line if need be to get me one of those fucking ventilators. If push comes to shove, I was that worried about this shit. But then, it sort of petered out, you know? It petered out. The fact that my kids did get sick and then they recovered. And at the time I was thinking, man, I think that was fucking it, That was fucking COVID. You know, it just leads me to conclude that I panicked because of not enough information, because the Chinese, because of their repressiveness, because of their censorship, led me to a false inference that what was going on was much more severe. I was not looking at, I was looking at exceptional cases rather than uh, a realistic sampling of cases. Just like, for instance, when you see those crash videos, those are the exceptional cases, not the run of the mill, you know? I mean, like you go on YouTube and you look for, a BMW R1200 GS riding videos, and you will get hundreds of hours of guys just riding and going, wherever the fuck they're going, but they're not crashing, right? And it's millions of fucking hours of that crap compared to just, a few videos here and there of guys actually crashing, but the crashes are sexier, that's the point. The people who are having seizures in a fucking hospital gurney, that's fucking sexy. It lights up your whole, fight or flight response. You see what I'm saying? And so it's not that we were played, we fooled ourselves. Simple as that. Okay. So now at the end of this, it seems that this shit is not so serious. Now, I'm going to make a couple of speculative predictions. Joe Biden is going to be installed as the 45th president of the United States. 45th or 46th, I forget what number we're at right now. He will be installed. And by the way, he's not going to last till the 4th of July. By the 4th of July, 2021, he will be replaced by Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris, oh man, I'm going to do a whole webinar on her. That woman is the fucking Antichrist. Well, the real Antichrist, as far as I'm concerned, is Barack Obama, who's pulling the strings of Kamala Harris. But that's, like I said, for another webinar, and I will be doing that webinar. Joe Biden will be installed as next president of the United States. Okay. And whatever people say about January 6th and this and that, it's not going to happen because there are not enough power centers in the United States that want Donald Trump for a second term. The only people who want him for a second term are the people who voted for him, but those people are powerless. Yes, I'm aware that it's more than half the electorate, is powerless. I know what I'm saying. They are powerless. and he's not going to get installed as president of the United States for a second term. Just not going to happen. Okay. And anybody who has that daydream, it's a daydream, and you don't believe me? Okay, wait a couple of weeks. It's just 2 weeks away, January 20th, noon, Washington, D.C. You're going to see Joe Biden be sworn in. Trump is not going to be there, by the way. He'll boycott it or some shit like that, but it doesn't matter. Legally, he will be president. That's all that matters. Okay. So anyway, once Joe Biden is installed, this whole thing is going to ramp down radically. As radically as the Antifa riots ramped down once it got near the election, once it started to be apparent that it was hurting Joe Biden's chances of being president. Okay. The press is going to start saying that, breakthrough and COVID-19 vaccine bullshit like that. They're going to sweep under the rug the fact that a lot of people are getting weird side effects from the COVID-19 vaccine. That's going to get swept under the rug. Okay. I think another speculation. There's this push for COVID vaccine, COVID passports, that you have to take the vaccine in order to travel and shit like that. I think that there's going to be enough pushback from healthcare workers that idea is going to die. Okay. The vaccine is going to become more of like an you can opt in or opt out kind of thing, and no kind of COVID passport after Joe Biden becomes president, by the way, because it will emerge that there are serious side effects of this shit. And the fact that a lot of people, a disproportionate number of people, are getting Bell's palsy, which is when half a person's face gets paralyzed, that's not fucking normal. Okay. And the fact that that's happening in enough cases that it's getting beyond the anecdotal, yeah, no. And so what's going to happen is that this talk of a COVID passport and shit like that, it's going to die down. Okay. Because there's going to be enough pushback from people, sensible people who know more or less what they're talking about, that it's going to be like a no-go, a non-starter. The whole thing is going to wind down in 2021. And retrospectively, a lot of people are going to start to realize that a lot of the hysteria in 2020 was in order to get Trump out of office, not to get Joe Biden elected. Nobody gives a shit about Joe Biden. Everybody knows what he is. He's a corrupt politician. Nobody likes him. Okay. He's grabby. He's corrupt. He's a piece of shit. Everybody knows that. But people's hatred for Donald Trump was just so insane that they were willing to crash the West. Ultimately, this is about Trump. And in Europe, it's about Brexit. The fact that the European Union is prohibiting travel from the United Kingdom over this bullshit notion that there's a quote unquote British variant of COVID. It's just, and there's no proof that this variant is any more lethal or any more dangerous than the regular COVID-19. They just pulled it out of a hat. And it's all just a punitive measure. Bottom line, it seems that over the past year, 10 months, this whole thing has been politicized and used to score points. Simple as that. Okay. You look at the numbers, the actual number of deaths. If you go by the official numbers, it's not that big of a deal. It's as simple as that. It's just not that big of a deal. Okay. And the fact that politicians, well-connected politicians in positions to actually know, they're not worried, that tells you all you need to know. Everything you need to know. See? Because politicians are human beings. If they truly believed that this shit is as serious as advertised, right? You would have seen a lot of them run to the hills. You would have seen a lot of them just sort of like, oh, I've decided to resign because I want to spend more time with my family or this or that. And they would have just vanished to some bunker somewhere. But the fact that they're like going to the French Laundry restaurant in San Francisco and having a high old time, or going to Puerto Rico or Cabo San Lucas or wherever the fuck, and they're telling the proles to lock down and social distance and wear masks, right? But they're not doing fucking shit. That tells you all you need to know, man. You see some press conference and some politician, backstage before he gets in front of the podium, he's like, "Oh yeah, where's my mask? Let me put it on real quick." And then he puts on the fucking mask as theater to get in front of the podium to talk. That tells you all you need to know, man. Think of it. You're a politician, okay? And you've been briefed, or through the grapevine of all the other politicians that, oh, there's this new disease. It's called disease X. And holy fucking shit, this shit is bad, man. This shit will kill you dead. What would you do? I mean, hand to heart, what would you do? You've got like a family, you got maybe like a 12-year-old son, 8-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old boy. Yeah, they're the light of your life, right? And you hear about this disease X that's suddenly popped up and that, makes people's eyes bleed out or some shit like that. It's airborne. What the fuck would you do? Huh? You get the fuck out of Dodge. That's what you do. You just go. You just say, "Look, man, it's been great being a politician and all, but I gotta go." And you'd grab your family and you'd get the fuck away. You'd go to some bunker or someplace as far away from possible from other people to make sure that your poor family didn't get it. That's what you do. That's what the sensible person would do. Anybody would do that. Okay? But they're not. They're treating this as theater. Yeah, like when they go through the TSA thing, and nobody thinks that a senator or a representative is carrying a fucking bomb in their shoes when they get on a plane, for crying out loud. But they go through the whole TSA theater shit when the cameras are on, right? But when the cameras aren't on, they go right through the speed lane or whatever it's fucking called, right? They go right through it, no checks, no nothing, because they know it's all bullshit. See? That's all you need to know. It's bullshit. And look, I was fooled. I've said this repeatedly, and I will say this here officially. I was fooled, and fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Okay, I got fooled. I got fooled by the Chinese and their repression of information that led me to a false inference. But looking at the information now and deliberately deciding not to fall for any false inference, I can tell you, man, this shit, it's not that bad. And it's basically been used by politicians to squeeze out Trump and to punish Britain. And that's basically it, insane as it sounds. Here in Ukraine, we're about to go into a lockdown, right? For 2 weeks. It's going to start in a couple of days rather. It's going to go for 2 weeks, and everybody's like, "Why the fuck didn't this happen earlier?" Right? Why during Christmas and the New Year's holiday we went into lockdown? That would have made more sense because people crowd around and shit like that. And they're like, "No, it's going to happen after the Orthodox Christmas," right? And you know why? Because it's kind of leaked. Because here, Ukraine, it's a backwards country. People talk. Excuse me. Hang on one moment, please. The rumor that's going around is the reason they're going into lockdown is so that Ukrainian citizens can continue to travel. Because basically, the Ukrainian government realizes that the Europeans want Ukraine to give the appearance that they're fighting COVID. Okay? And if they don't carry out the appearance of fighting COVID, then there'll be punitive measures, i.e. hassles with transportation of goods and services between Ukraine and the European Union, difficulty for Ukrainian citizens to travel. And so they're basically saying, okay, we'll go 2 weeks for this shit, just so that we don't get hassled by the European Union. That's basically what's going on, you know? Here, in a former Soviet republic, they know a bullshitter when they see one. They know when you have to, toe some bullshit line. And they're not surprised because they had to do it during the Soviet era. They had to listen to how wonderful the Soviet system really was when they knew it was bullshit. And they all had to say, oh, yes, the Soviet system is the best, communism rules, all that shit, just so that they could get along. See? So they know the score. They're not naive, right? It's the people in the West who are the naive ones. See? So anyway, I've gone on ranting for like an hour, and I'm really interested in your opinions about this shit. So let's throw it open to questions. Yeah. Post your questions. Give me a minute to go through them, and I'll be sure to call you out. Um, I highly recommend that you read that FDA document of the COVID vaccine. And like I said, compare the placebo to the vaccinated. That's the key issue, okay? Because when you compare the two directly, head to head, yeah, it's like the vaccine kicks ass, right? But when you compare the placebo numbers to the general population and you realize that this is the only hardcore objective study of a large group of people over an extended period of time, you start to realize what bullshit we're really talking about, that this is really trivial, okay? But anyway, um, let's see. Let me hit up Chris O. Chris O has got 3 questions. So he's like a 3-for-1 kind of guy. Yeah. Okay, Chris O, you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Coach.
How's it going?
It's getting gloomy in Canada.
Oh,
We're going,
yeah. Yeah, the People's Republic of Canada, you mean? Yeah.
I'm in Toronto, so we're in hardcore lockdown.
Yep. It's all theater. It's all to make you feel that the politicians are doing something. So anyway, what's on your mind, man?
Well, 3 questions. Have you come across any data on increased non-COVID deaths last year? I
No.
mean, in terms of murder or suicide.
Yeah, let me answer that question right off the bat. No, I have not. It's contradictory, and I suspect that a lot of people don't want that information to come out precisely because it shows that the suicide rate, especially, is just much worse. There are localized bits of data about suicides, about murder rates. Murder rates in a lot of cities in the U.S. has skyrocketed, but that could also be attributed to the whole BLM rioting and the defund the police movement and all that shit, right? But that's like specific cities. It's not like the whole of the United States or a whole continent or a region or the world. I suspect that data, the worldwide numbers, we're not going to see them for a good long while until this all has died down. And then people are going to be like, ooh, wasn't this awful? All these people who died by suicide. And it'll come out like in 2023, 2024, shit like that, you know? Yeah, when everybody sort of like looks back on this period and says like, ho, 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 wasn't it funny when we all flipped our lids over this COVID shit? You know what I mean?
I mean, just imagine how many people starved in India, for example.
God knows, man. Look, I think the suicide numbers, the heart attacks, and the cancer, and bottom line, I think a lot of old people died from loneliness, you know? Um, there's nothing worse for an old person to be deprived of their family because when you get old, you realize that it's the only thing that really matters. Money comes and goes, but your family, your children especially and grandchildren, that's what gives older people their joy in life. And when you strip that from them, that's like a fucking death sentence. Yeah. That's why I think that this is exceptionally cruel. Anyway, going on to your second question, please.
What will be the long-term social consequences, specifically in the West, even if it all blows away? I mean, the lack of trust in government and other people. I mean, whenever I go for a walk now, I just see people crossing the street on the other side just because I'm walking on a wide sidewalk. I mean, how long will this last?
It might be permanent, you know, the social fear, and that's not a good thing, by the way. That's a catastrophic thing because a society that has low trust, people start fucking each other over. I mean, cheating each other. People start hurting one another, stealing from one another. You know, That's not a good thing. No matter how you look at it. Okay. Now, the loss of trust in the government and the media is incalculable. I don't think that these institutions realize how much credibility they burned, especially the media. The media does not seem to realize how despised they have become. It's really kind of fascinating. They have no clue how little people trust them and believe in them and think of them. They think that it's still like Woodward and Bernstein time, that the press can do no wrong. It's really interesting. Yeah. And what's your third question?
Well, you mentioned your presentation, the Chinese quote information and emerge from censorship. Well,
Yep.
whatever emerges from censorship is allowed and planned. So my third
Not
question is,
necessarily. Not necessarily.
okay, my third question
Because
is, could
because
foreign, yes,
I want to anticipate your question, because that premise that only the information that comes out of China is information that the Chinese government wants to emerge, that's obviously false, because they can't plug up every leak in the dike. Information can slip out that they have no interest in showing the world.
sure, I'm
And
just
I would
focusing on official information, what they
Oh,
allow.
official, sure, sure. But the thing is, the initial videos, they were all unofficial. And officially, the Chinese were saying, "There's nothing to see here, folks. Move along."
Okay.
Okay. So yeah. But I have to predicate whatever you have to say about the Chinese with that, insofar as this case initially. Okay.
Okay.
But continue with your question.
Could foreign, Chinese or not, quote unquote, unrestricted warfare be a reason for the destruction of the Western system and global economy?
Well, there's something you have to keep in mind about China. Okay. People outside of China look at China as this behemoth that is like, just ruthlessly like a machine, just like chugging along. But, in China, they have a lot of problems. They have a lot of problems. Okay. A lot of financial problems. They have a huge debt overhang. They have a whole bunch of financial problems that are too long to get into. Um, so when you're looking at it from the outside, it looks like they've got everything in hand. When you look at it from the inside, you realize that the Chinese Communist Party does not have everything so firmly in hand as people outside would want you to believe. And the the notion that all of this is like a Chinese op, no, no, because they're not that well organized. They might be able to cause a little bit of havoc here or there, but it's the problems that are going on in the West. If I had to put a percentage tag on it, I'd say maybe 3% is foreign interference of all sorts, and the 97% is just domestic insanity. Okay.
But that's the point. That's the point. I mean, for all the problems that they have, the leadership by now is quite strategic, and they know other systems. They know the Western system weaknesses, corruption,
Yeah.
political. All you have to do is make a plan and say, how can we rise to the top, become the hegemon, quicker, and we
Yep.
know we can never compete. Well, for now, we can't compete militarily. If we want to, take over Hong Kong or Taiwan, how can we just start something and let the useful idiots take care of the rest?
Well, no, yeah. I mean, it's basically that. Look, if you fall for this trap that everything that happens is because somebody else is pulling the strings, okay? Um, it's a trap because nothing can be solved on the one hand, and it blinds you to the fact that people are stupid and they do stupid shit that they later regret. And a lot of times they do things out of panic, okay? Panic based on sometimes legitimate fear, sometimes misplaced fear, sometimes legitimate information, sometimes overblown information. Okay. Uh, uh, to say that the chaos that's enveloping the West is all because of China is, I view it as an excuse. Okay. I see it as maybe it's a contributing factor, but very minor. And I think that a lot of things that have been going on in the West for several decades are much more likely the contributing factors than Chinese psyops. And look, ultimately, the answer to this debate that you and I have here, this difference of opinion, call it what you will, neither one of us is going to know for at least 30 years, 50 years, when the dust settles and historians are picking over the bones of this period and they come across information and maybe are able to answer it definitively. Okay. But at this time, right in the middle of it, neither you or I can really know. I personally don't think so, because it's been my experience that conspiracies never really work as intended. Okay. Because people fuck up, because people cannot control outcomes um, as much as they would like to think that they can. See, a lot of times things happen sort of like by chance, and my experience has taught me that you can't really control shit. You can only surf shit. Okay, it's like the ocean. You can't make the waves. The waves just come. All you can do is surf them. To try to make a wave is foolishness. See, but that's my opinion.
Sure. I mean, let's agree to disagree on hypotheticals.
You know?
But if you allow me to ask one final quick question,
Sure.
who do you think benefited and benefits most in the West or abroad from the lockdowns of vaccines? Whether it's the big pharma, whether it's some foreign nation, whether it's a political class, who are the top winners here? Because they're always winners.
Oh yeah. But it's not one winner. Okay. How can I put this? See, a lot of people wanted the lockdowns, but for very different reasons. Okay. Like, for instance, the bureaucratic class in the United States wanted it because they could grab more power. But a lot of the Democratic politicians wanted it because it would hurt Trump. And there was a lot of people who were in favor of lockdowns because uh, they were raised in a culture of worshiping security and of personal paranoia, safety and how concerned they are with personal safety. And so these different groups allied to push for lockdowns. And of course, there wasn't the opposing side that would say, no, this is stupid. There was a lack of leadership on the part of Trump, quite frankly. Trump should have said, no, this is just dumb and it'll hurt us much more than it'll benefit us. So we're not going to do it, you know? But he was a weakling. And so that happened, right? Now, a lot of companies, for instance, they got caught flat-footed, and they were like, "Holy shit, this is happening," right? And it was only later that people realized, "Oh man, this is really great for Amazon, for instance, because everybody's going to buy stuff for Amazon." But do I think that Amazon was pushing for this shit? No, they never thought that this pandemic in China was going to benefit them directly as it did. It after the fact, after it started happening, they were like, "Fuck yeah, keep on going with the lockdown. This is great for us." Yeah, and no question that, for instance, the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, the principal shareholder in Amazon, of course they're pushing for more lockdowns. Of course, because it directly benefits his business, but it's not something that he anticipated. It wasn't that, in like, I don't know, September of 2019, he was sitting there and saying, if we set off a pandemic, Amazon is going to make money hand over fist. No, of course not. But he surfed the zeitgeist. You see my point?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, this ties
but
to your most recent video about the elites. Part of them are just useful idiots who are very obedient, and part of them are
yeah,
psychopaths who try to take advantage of any situation.
yeah, exactly. But remember, a psychopath just wants more personal power. Okay? You got to recognize that there are a lot of people who truly and genuinely believe that this lockdown and masks and social distancing is to keep everybody safe. They truly believe that. Okay?
But that's the issue because after listening to your webinar, I agree with you. Many people who are listening. I mean, with that knowledge, how to even deal with people on the other side, whether it's intellectual or character. I mean, there's complete lack of trust. There's an unfolding of social fabric, dealing
Yeah.
with people in my own family, like my aunt or my cousin, is saying, no, don't visit us because it's dangerous. And I can't even try to speak sanely to them.
No. Yeah, that's a tragedy. It's a complete destruction of the Western social bonds. Because if you try to lay out facts for them, they dispute them. Because we're living in a post-truth world, that they do not believe facts and data, and they say that the facts and data are just shit that you're making up. That's why in this presentation I was so careful and deliberately and self-consciously careful to use only official approved data. Okay, because I mean this is something that you can show to somebody potentially on the other side. But see, even the people who are on the other side, like these aunts and uncles of yours, right? They're going to look at that 2.85% mortality rate, which is insignificant as far as I'm concerned, right? And they're going to say it's too high, it should be zero, which is just insane because you can't. They want to eliminate death. They want to torque down all risk until it's zero, which is impossible, you know?
This is just another reason why, you mentioned in your
Hmm.
previous video about leaving the West, whether it's
Yeah.
political, that, but this is just another reason. I'm looking around this culture and this, I mean, my opinion, it's much better to move somewhere such as Eastern Europe or some African country where they're used to bullshit, where they can filter it out.
Well, yeah, no, but they're also realistic. See, that's a key issue because it's a lack of realism. Because these Westerners think that you can torque down risk to the point where there is no more death, which is just insane. Because everybody dies eventually. It's part of life. Okay, everybody suffers injury. Everybody suffers disease. Everybody eventually dies. It's a part of life. You have to be realistic about it. But so many Westerners are of the opinion that if enough measures are implemented by the government, then there will be no more death, which is insane. The only way that that would happen is that if everybody is in a prison cell, and nobody ever gets out, and they just die of old age in some prison cell. That's the only way to eliminate all risk, which is, of course, no way to live at all. But, you know, so yeah, that's why I've been saying it seems sensible at this point, if you're a thinking person, that it's over for you in the West, and you should just be looking for another place to go to
Well,
because
thank you for at least the optimistic ending to the presentation where you said this probably will end once, the Biden gets sworn in and it all kind of calms down. I mean, that's an optimistic note that whoever's cockroaching it out in the West, like I am in Toronto, Canada, I mean, at least hopefully 2 or 3 months from now, for reasons beyond our control, which are geopolitical, or things will calm down, we can travel and move again. Hopefully, we'll have to take the vaccine or the travel passport. That's a positive thing I
well,
see in your presentation.
I just want to say one thing. It would seem sensible to when if they have these travel vaccines, I don't believe that they'll have them. Okay, I do not believe, because I do believe that enough healthcare workers are going to push back because they're genuinely scared. They're genuinely like, fuck this shit. I don't want to take it because it hasn't been tested enough. Because everybody in the every healthcare worker knows that the polio vaccine, for instance, has been used for decades and it works. And the risks involved with it, there are risks. They are very small. The likelihood are very small for a polio vaccine. And so it's a risk, the risk versus reward. Yeah, no question. Polio vaccine, yeah. But this shit, nobody knows. And it's been developed over too little time. And it's novel. It's not using proven technologies. And so this shit could be catastrophic. I suspect, and this is pure speculation on my part, I suspect that it will cause infertility among people. I think that that is in the offing. And of course, we're not going to know about this for at least a couple of years. But I suspect that that's the issue. Now, I can't tell you what to do, and I certainly am not going to. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm obliged to take the vaccine and my children are obliged to take the vaccine in order to get a travel document, then I will certainly do so. Absolutely. But I think that some people, I'm not saying who, I mean, just some people out there, they might, you know, just decide that they're going to pay off somebody and pretend to get the vaccine so that they can get the travel document. I don't know who would do such a thing. And those people are really awful people. I just want to say for the record, really deceptive pieces of shit who would do such a thing. But I think that there are some people who are going to do that. I'm going to be a good citizen because you all know that I'm a decent, God-fearing person who believes in doing what's right and what's true. And I believe my government, whatever government I happen to live under, and whatever they say is true, I believe them. And so if they ask me to take the vaccine in order to get a travel document, I will absolutely do so. And I vehemently and forcefully believe that anybody who tries to cheat the system some way is an evil piece of shit. Yeah, that's what I think. That's my statement insofar as that's concerned. Are we clear? Are we clear, Chris?
Absolutely, and I agree with you that such people are despicable and should be crucified on every street
Fuck
corner.
yeah. Fuck yeah.
Thank you very
Good
much, Chris.
talking to you. Take it easy, man. Let's see. Let me look at you. Tim L asks real quick, do you think that some major violence will break out tomorrow or within the next couple of weeks in DC? I think a lot of people want there to be violence so that they can discredit the right. I think so. I think that the DC mayor is deploying National Guard troops precisely with an eye to potentially, what you call it, provoking the protesters into violence. Sure. Uh, Um, RQD, I don't think I've ever spoken to RQD, so let me bring him on. Arky, are you there? Oh, Arky says no mic. Oh man, Arky, come on. Got to get yourself a microphone. Um, okay, so Arky, unfortunately, doesn't have a microphone, but Arky D has the following questions. He says he has two questions. The first question is, um, why do you think left-wing governments outside the US are more likely to lock up their citizens, i.e. Melbourne, Australia? Yeah, fucking A. This can't be Trump related. It must have something to do with the personalities of people who lean left. Yeah, they're authoritarian. Simple as that. Yeah. Look, their authoritarianism comes from what they believe are good intentions. Okay. And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. These people on the left think that they are doing it for your good, your benefit, for your own good, whether you like it or not. Because ultimately, people on the left do not believe that people have free agency. Okay? You got to understand this on the left. They do not believe that human beings know what's best for themselves. They believe that only the government knows what's best for you or some larger organization. Okay? You got to understand this. And the source of this is pretty obvious because most left wingers make bad decisions for themselves. And so people who on the left who are more capable tend to see how horrible their left wing peers' decisions actually are and say, oh, the government will do better. See? And people on the right, of course, tend to view other right wing people who make sensible decisions, say, oh, yeah, I know better. We know better. Individuals know better than the government. The government is far away. We're here on the ground. We see it. So we know what's best. And so that's basically the problem. See, the left, they're doing this, a lot of them, not all of them, because there's a segment that are just cynical bastards, like Kamala Harris, for instance. A lot of these people, they're saying all this stuff because they genuinely think so. They genuinely believe that they are doing good. Okay. But, you know, they don't know. Uh, let me see. You got to keep in. Oh, he says so. Archie continues. In saying this, there are still obviously many right-wing governments around the world, example Romania and Greece, that have implemented strict quarantine measures. Why might this be? Because they are towing the line of Europe. Okay, you're referencing Romania and Greece, small countries in Europe. They are towing the line, and they don't want to get punished. by the European Union for not towing the line. So they find it easier to implement some quarantine and get some European Union money in return for the pain and suffering that this inflicts on their population, rather than going against the EU and potentially suffering punitive measures that would be much more harmful. I mean, think of it. You're a small government in Europe. Europe, out up in Germany or Brussels, I mean, really Germany, they decide lockdown for the whole continent. You're going to be like, okay, please don't hurt me. Oh, and you'll give me money. Great. I'll do the lockdown as much as you want. If you're going to give me money, fine. I'm not going to go against you. You see, that's what's going on. See? The second question. If the UK strain is a myth propagandized by Europe, why does the rest of the Western international media carry on the myth? Um, and finally, he says, I love you, coach. No homo. Yeah, sure, Arky. I'm kidding. I'm teasing, of course. Uh, I don't love you, Arky. I'm sorry. No homo. Anyway, to answer your question seriously, um, excuse me. If the UK strain is a myth propagandized by Europe, why does the rest of the Western international media, US, Canada, Australia, carry on the myth? Because they're all punishing Britain over Brexit. See, because their political and economic relationship with Europe, with the European Union, is more important than their political and economic relationship with Great Britain, because the EU is a larger economy. Simple as that. Okay. Look, you got to keep in mind that the EU for 4 years has been trying to whip Britain into rescinding the leave vote. Okay. And they've been using every measure, both fair and foul. And they don't have any bones about doing any measure to get their way. Because they genuinely believe that it is to Great Britain's benefit to be a part of the European Union. They genuinely believe this, okay? And so, in their minds, they are acting morally. They are saving the people of Great Britain from this disastrous decision. And if it means hurting the people of Great Britain, well, you got to break some eggs to make an omelet. And that's their justification. See? You got to keep in mind, see, these people doing these horrible things, they do not think that they are the bad guys. Remember, the SS back in World War II, they weren't thinking to themselves that they were the villains of the war. They thought they were the heroes. Everybody thinks that they're the hero. Everybody thinks that what they're doing for the good of themselves and of everybody else. Nobody is sitting around saying, hey, I'm the fucking villain. I'm the evil guy here in this story. Yay me. Nobody thinks that. Okay? Uh, Humphrey Chen. Uh, Humphrey, are you there? Humphrey? Humphrey. Oh man, come on, buddy. You guys gotta plug in your microphones. Okay. Humphrey has a really good question. He says the safety protocols of the COVID vaccine require 2 years to follow up. Do you think we are going to get more side effect reports in the 2 years to come? Since Pfizer CEO cashed out 60% of his stocks already. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Thank you. Thank you, Humphrey. Um, since Pfizer CEO cashed out 60% of his stock already, wouldn't there be legal ramifications against him for insider trading, etc.? Um, well, yeah, there would be, and there could potentially be a clawback, okay, unless he's able to plausibly deny, okay. Look, I think that the CEO of Pfizer who cashed out 60% of his stock, um, I don't think that there is a Pfizer report floating around saying this shit is really dangerous and we're going to get into a shitload of trouble later on. No, I don't think that there's such a report. But I think that he came to that conclusion without needing a report. Okay. Because this guy, the CEO of Pfizer, he's no dummy. You don't get to be the CEO of any large corporation by being stupid. Okay. And so, yeah, in 2 years, all kinds of side effects can happen. Look, the Bell's palsy shit, that's happened now. And they barely started the rollout on this shit. Okay? God knows what's going to fucking happen. Oh, Humphrey, are you there? Humphrey.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. How's it going?
Great, great. I'm actually in Portugal right now. There's no lockdown over here. It's fine. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, here in Ukraine, they're like I said, they're starting in a couple of days, and it's just totally cosmetic. It's total bullshit, and everybody knows it, and it's just annoying. But anyway, you had a good question. What do you think is going to happen in 2 years?
Personally, I think that we're going to have more reports of side effects of
Yeah,
different kinds coming up in the next 2 years. So that's linked to my second question: is like if there are going to be so many side effects, assuming that it happens, wouldn't the
yeah,
CEO be I mean, be subjected to legal ramifications. So there's the
yeah,
question one and two. Yeah.
yeah. It's called a clawback. Okay, if somebody profits from a business enterprise and they know that what they were doing was fraudulent at the time, legally, the money that they earned can be clawed back from them. Okay, it's tough to prove. Okay, like for instance, there was this fellow at Enron. He was a chief financial officer, and he quit and cashed out everything. Uh, I want to say like a year or two before the whole thing went up in smoke, right? And nothing happened to him because he was able to get out ahead of time. And I don't know. I mean, it's a legal issue, and I don't know the specifics of how you'd get away with it. But you see, there. How can I put it? To prove in court that somebody knew that some bad outcome was going to happen, there has to be some written proof of some sort, okay? Or some unimpeachable testimony that that has corroborating evidence from the time, like a memo or something, okay? Not just like my word. Like, suppose the following, Humphrey. Suppose you and I worked at this corporation, okay, back in the year 2010, and we were doing something, and we knew we were going to make a lot of money, but then, like in a year or two or three, it was all going to blow up, and people were going to realize that it was a big old scam, right? And see, you and I might realize that it's going to blow up, but if we don't have anything in writing, we can potentially profit, sell our stake in the company, and go off and do other things. And then later, by the year 2013, when it blew up, we could say, oh, we had no idea that that was going to happen. You know, that's awful, right? Because there was no contemporaneous proof. Now, suppose um, I decide to turn on you, and I tell the district attorney or the prosecutor, I tell him, oh yeah, Humphrey, he knew it. He knew that it was going to all blow up. And you, in your defense, you'd say, well, show me contemporaneous proof that I knew, some document, some memo that proved that I knew back in 2010. Okay, you demand that, and my word would not be enough. Just me saying that you knew in 2010 would not be enough. There'd have to be some sort of contemporaneous proof, some document written in 2010 that could be proven that you had read at the time. Oops, hang on a second. Uh, yeah, sorry about that. So you see the problem. See, the COVID CEO, if this guy probably has like lawyers who probably looked through his situation so that he could do this. If he sold 60% of his stake, then he knows that the stock is going to go down. Now, if they're about to put out this vaccine with billions and billions of dollars in sales, right? Um, but the guy is selling out, then he knows something. He knows something or he infers something. If he knows it by way of some report, then he can get into a lot of trouble later. But if there's no report, or he can credibly claim that he never saw any report, and nobody can tie him to any report that he actually saw, then he'll get away with it. He could infer that this whole thing is going to go up in smoke and cash out now and get away with it later because there won't be any way to tie him to actually having known. You see what's going on?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much. So it looks
Yeah.
like he's going to get away with it no matter what is the outcome of the vaccine. Looks like.
Well, if he's selling, then he obviously believes that the vaccine is going to go tits up.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, come on, think about it. You know, you own God knows how many millions of shares in some company, and your company is developing this vaccine, and you're gonna get huge contracts for billions of dollars for this shit, and you're selling your stock. Fuck you. Fuck you. I mean, you see my point, you know? So yeah, and Humphrey, thank you very much for bringing that up. I'd forgotten all about the Pfizer guy. That's another little uh, anecdotal observation that kind of like proves the point. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're a chef and you don't dare to eat your own food, I think something's
Exactly.
wrong. Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Yes. If you're a chef and don't eat at your own restaurant, you know, you know that it's bad. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like, isn't this horrible, Humphrey? I mean, I'm asking you as a human being, isn't this horrible?
Yes, I do agree it's horrible, but as you know, a lot of big corporations, their CEOs, I don't think they really think about that much from an ethical perspective. I mean, just looking at back at the 2008 Lehman shock, I think a lot of the CEOs they got golden parachutes, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, look, this wasn't always the case. Back in 1982, when I was 81, 82, something like that, um, there was this case, the Tylenol case, that what happened was some crazy people were tampering with Tylenol pills. Tylenol is like a very common aspirin. You buy it over the counter. You don't need a prescription for it. And they were tampering with it and putting cyanide pills into bottles of Tylenol. It killed several people. And when this came out, the CEO at the time, and I forget his name, he didn't wait for the authorities to order him or to do anything. When this came out, he instantly and of his own accord um, pulled every single bottle of Tylenol off the shelves and threw them all away, disposed of them all, and it was millions of dollars in losses. Right? He disposed of all the shit, and he put out a big statement in all the major newspapers saying that Tylenol is a company that prioritizes the well-being of the patient more than anything else, and they would never allow um, the risk of these tampered medicines to remain on the shelves. So that's why they pulled them, and they were going to create a new bottle that would be tamper-proof, which they did. And all medicines that come out today, they come out in the little tamper-proof case, right, with a little silver lining and the little plastic top that breaks open when you open it, right, for the first time. That was all Tylenol's invention, because the guy said, and he said publicly, and I remember this at the time. He said that the responsibility of Tylenol is to the well-being of the potential customer more than its bottom line. And that was a very noble attitude, and and it was an attitude that everybody appreciated. And Tylenol did lose millions of dollars, but it gained a lot of trust because they saw that the company cared more about the people, the potential consumers, the health of the consumers, than its bottom line. But that is no longer the case. That hasn't been the case in like a long, long time, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing the episode. It shows us that he did the right thing, and it's a shame that nowadays we don't see as much of such cases and examples anymore.
We don't see any of those cases anymore. It's a
Yeah,
tragedy.
exactly. Yeah, it's very sad for the
Yeah,
humankind. Yeah.
yeah. Humphrey, thanks very, very much for being on. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Coach.
Take it easy. um, Yannick has a question, and let me bring him on. Yannick, are you there?
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Pretty good, pretty good. And yourself?
Well, we just entered another 14 days of lockdown in Hong Kong, so everything's closed for another 2 weeks. Fun stuff.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'm not using that language, but pretty much, yeah.
No, you can
No, I'm
use
at,
any language you want.
nah, I hear you. I hear you. It's just if I start, I'm not going to finish anytime soon. Yeah, no, I actually jumped into the webinar when you were talking about people not taking the vaccine, being pieces of shit and everything.
Oh yeah.
And on it, to be honest, okay, like I have no trust at all, and this is why I wrote the follow up to my question.
Yeah.
Why does that vaccine come with a disclaimer? I mean, this is China class stuff, and it ties into what you were saying about like the thalidomide. I think that was like maybe 6-8 weeks ago when you were still in Amsterdam.
Yeah, no,
It,
Yannick, I'll tell you what I said. You might not have caught it, so let me just reiterate it.
mhm.
If
Okay,
my
cool. Sorry.
government, if my government, whichever government is going on, tells me that the vaccine is safe, well, by golly, I believe them, and I will take the vaccine if I need to, and my children will take the vaccine if they need to in order to be able to travel and have no problem. But I have heard that there are some pieces of shit who are planning on not taking the vaccine,
Ah,
you know? Yeah, these
I
pieces of
gotcha.
shit,
I gotcha.
they are fucking pieces of shit that should
I
be just,
gotcha.
they should be expunged from civil society. Yeah, because they're trying to game the system. They're trying to
This is
fool
what's
people.
happening right now. Actually, I'm from Quebec in the French part of Canada,
Yeah,
and they're actually going in to arrest people on Christmas Day, and they're shaming people that actually travel, let's say, to Mexico or something for two
yeah,
weeks. It's absolutely horrible. My mom wants to
yeah,
go to Martinique in February, and she's not telling anybody because she's just afraid of the backlash.
yeah. It's insanity. It's insanity that's going on. Okay, as simple as that. It's just
All
hysteria,
good.
and
All good.
and people are going to look back on this period and just be like, what the fuck were we thinking? Or more likely, a lot of the people are just going to sort of like sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Okay.
Yep.
They're going to
Yep.
pretend that all this, no, this hysteria didn't happen. Oh, I don't remember. Yeah, the guilty people are going to pretend it
Yep.
didn't happen. And right. Yeah. And right now, most people are guilty. Most people are guilty of this hysteria. And
Yep.
like I said in this webinar, at first in February and March, I thought that this shit was airborne Ebola. I thought so. I said
Mhm.
so. I was wrong. Okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with believing something and then realizing that the data does not support your belief and it's completely different and changing your
Mhm.
mind accordingly. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, the sin is to hold on to a belief in the face of facts. See,
Yep.
that's the sin, you know? So anyway, yeah, this shit, oh God, it's just, ugh. Yeah, and Sebastian Mendoz says here, Canada is fucked. Yes,
Yes.
yes,
It
yes.
absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, I encourage people from my native part of the world to get out of there before it turns into the Berlin Wall. But anyway, I'm not going to take any more of your time. Thanks for clarifying that. And
Yeah, no problem.
hang in there.
Anytime, Yannick.
All
Yeah,
righty.
yeah. Take it easy, Yannick.
Cheers.
Um, Rajan says, lots of love from Nepal. I'll bring in Rajan. I've never talked to anybody from Nepal. Oh, he doesn't have a microphone. Oh man. Rajan, man, we should have had a microphone. I would like to talk to you. Let me see. Hang on a second. Chewy Bar. I don't think I've ever talked to Chewy Bar. Good name, by the way. Let me bring him on. And yeah, Chewy Bar, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. How's it going?
Hi. Hi, doing well. Yeah, I think it's the first time I've been on this webinar, or actually like talked on this webinar. Yeah.
Oh, it's great to hear you. Where are you from, by the way?
Oh, I'm from the East Coast, around DC area.
Okay. And so you
Yeah.
have a question here about the German health workers. Why don't you hit us all with it?
All right, so you said that the German health workers refuse to take the vaccine, and you say that it's either because they don't
Half of
trust
them.
the
Half of
or
them.
half of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's either because they don't trust the safety of the vaccine, but it could also be that they don't take the COVID situation seriously. But
Yeah.
I realize that there's other first world countries that are making their own vaccine, and
Hmm.
that's a result of those first world countries not trusting in the safety of the rush vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna.
Well, no, there are, AstraZeneca has a vaccine, Pfizer, Moderna, and also the Russians are developing their own vaccine. Okay, so I don't think it has to do with any particular company. I mean, in the West, the companies are multinational, international, and what you call it? The Russian one is Russia, Eastern Europe. Okay, I think it's an issue of just generalized distrust of all vaccines, any vaccine that has been developed for this disease, insofar as the German healthcare workers. I don't think it's against one particular company or another. Okay.
Uh,
Um, and as I understand it, and I could be wrong, anybody who's German or a German healthcare worker, please correct me if I am wrong. It seems that the Germans would get like a mixed bag of vaccines, right? There seems the Russians are talking about creating some sort of vaccine passport that would require their vaccine. There could be there could develop some sort of like East versus West kind of vaccine war, but that remains to be seen, and it's very early in the game, and so who knows? To speculate about it is just it's too early to tell. Okay, and but to your point, I don't think it has to do with any particular company per se. I think it's all of these vaccines, because all of these vaccines were developed in similar fashion, i.e., in a very, very short period of time with very, very little control, and all of the companies have been released from any kind of liability insofar as secondary or side effects from this vaccine, which should scare the shit out of everybody, by the way. The fact that they're going to be not held liable means, look, they could be putting cyanide in these fucking things. And, well, tough cookie. You drop dead, well, not my problem. You know what I mean?
yeah,
This is a fucking disaster. Are you going to take
yeah.
it?
If my workplace requires me to, but I know that in other smaller first world countries like Japan or Korea, they are making their own vaccines, but uh, I know they're taking the process a lot slower because I know that, like you said, the US, China, and then I know, in fact, even India has like stage 3 or phase 3 vaccines, which
Mm-hmm.
were completely rushed. But I know that, like I said, the smaller first world countries are in phase 2, and most of them are released for the public in next year around the second or first quarter. So
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe that's another sign of or a proof of you saying that these countries don't trust any other vaccines but their own.
I don't know. I mean, I honest to God don't know. I also realize that these vaccines are going to be huge money makers for the companies. And so a country that has a pharmaceutical company, it would be in the best interest of that country to foment their homegrown vaccine company as opposed to buy it from a foreign country. It would deplete their
Uh,
foreign reserves. Think of it in those terms. So, for instance, the Japanese, why would they want to spend dollars or euros that they have in their foreign reserve balance? Why would they want to spend it on some drug from a European or American manufacturer if they can spend it from their own homegrown company? You see what I'm saying? So there's
uh,
that issue, because these contracts are going to be worth billions of dollars. I mean, okay, just this is ballpark, but say that each dose costs, just say that it costs $40 to manufacture and 50 and it retails for $50. They're $10 margins, right? And in the United States, you dose out, say, 200 million doses, right? That's 2 billion in net profit, just profit. Okay. In Europe, you know, Europe has roughly 350 million, 360 million people. I forget, frankly, but they're going to make a lot of fucking money. I'm talking pure profit, okay? And a lot of the executives are going to get huge bonuses. Remember, their pay and their year-end bonuses are directly tied to profitability of the company. And so they're going to do everything in their power to have those contracts. They're not going to want those contracts to go to a foreign country or a company in a foreign country. See, yeah, of course, you know. So the whole thing is just ugly. And the thing that's key is that it's not that fucking serious. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, it's I think that that's the tragedy of it, you know. But anyway, anything else? Anything else on your mind, Chewy?
Oh, that's about it. But I don't know if you saw my first comment about how I thought the how you said you can only surf waves instead of ride or instead of make waves, and that's also a result of how the viruses first originated. I rather personally, I don't think the vaccine or the virus is made in a laboratory, but rather found, and then it was manipulated to be artificially spread to stop the Hong Kong protests back in last year, December.
But
Or
that's way speculative. You know, I mean, the theory that I have is that they were fucking around with stuff just because they have the opportunity to fuck around with stuff, and they got sloppy, and some shit got away from them. Red Pill Germany, with whom I'm pretty friendly with, and he's a scientist, and he said that the Chinese scientists tend to be extremely sloppy with safety precautions and safety protocols. They often as not just ignore safety protocols because their scientific culture is not um, is not high on safety protocols. It's not like that big of a deal because it's a culture and it has to be inculcated. Whereas in Germany, for instance, the safety culture is extremely high, and so it could be. My thinking is that the Chinese were just fucking around with some shit, not even like biological warfare shit necessarily, but just to fuck around with shit and see what they could do with gene splicing and whatnot. And one of these viruses got away from them. Simple as that, and not more complicated than that. You know, I mean, you always have to assume that people are just stupid, not malicious. You know, that they get sloppy and do foolish things, not that they're like rubbing their hands together and being all evil. You know what I mean? That's my
Mhm.
thinking. And the notion that they released this deliberately to stamp out the Hong Kong protests, it would be just easier to roll out some tanks. So that to me just doesn't seem reasonable. See what I'm saying?
Mm.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, Chewy, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Yeah, definitely. Glad to be on here.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, I'll ask you, and I'm asking everybody, you guys, I'm very proud of the fucking index, man. The index is just so goddamn time consuming. But have you guys been checking it out?
Oh yeah, I saw it. I think it's a very good. If you want to, instead of scrolling down, you can just go to the index to find
Yeah.
older videos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want you all to go check it out because, god damn, it's taken me a long goddamn time to make. So yeah, here's a shout out to it. Anyway, Chewy, great talking to you. Take it easy, man.
All right, thank you, Coach.
Um, let me see. Uh, oh yeah, Yannick. Yeah, I'll bring in Yannick because he said that he knows something about the Chinese protesters, the Hong Kong protesters. I'm kind of curious about that. Yannick, yeah,
Hey,
tell us about the Hong Kong protesters. Yeah.
well, I worked in the protests actually. I was doing security, so I had got firsthand experience. I know police, I know protesters, and I mean, I find that what's happening right now, contrarily to what's vehicled by popular media, um, I'm gonna go out and I might have a you might call it controversial opinion here, but the more time goes and the less sympathy I have for the Hong Kong protesters, and I've lived in Hong Kong for 12 years, like this is my home and everything. But here's the thing, okay? If you take a step back and look at things into the historic context, Now, does it suck for the current young generation? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Because buying an apartment, buying a flat here, you're not going to pull out of there under 10 or 15 million, and that's the low end. But what happens is, okay, like I remember my ex-brother-in-law, my ex-wife is actually from here. My ex-brother-in-law actually fled from Shenzhen, which is just up north of here, by swimming through the river. And he swam through the river, and they were probably millions of people leaving mainland China because of what was happening with the Cultural Revolution. They were millions to do that, to actually move to Hong Kong, where they were freer. And of course, it turned into the economic miracle that we know. But the problem is, okay, if you rewind back, let's say from 1965, 70s, and so on, everybody here knew that 1997 was coming. Everybody knew how China was. Obviously, they had left it for that particular reason. But what actually happens is those generations. Let's put it. Let's average it out. 2 or 3 past generations. What did they do? They actually just played ostrich, and they just told themselves, the hell with it. Let's just make some money, and they kicked the can down the road. I feel bad for the current generation because they're stuck with this, and it's come home to roost. But before anything actually progresses or works or changes, the first conversation they have to have is with their parents and their grandparents as to why things, like in the same idea that, to solve a problem, you have to first recognize that you have it. Sadly, the culture here of keeping face and, not looking bad and everything is going to prevent that for another 2 or 3 generations easily.
Jesus. Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Okay.
That's my rant.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, man. Take it easy.
Cheerio. Bye.
I want to talk to Tim L, who's got a question, because Tim, look, I'm kind of disappointed in you, Tim, because, and I'll be frank with you, Tim, you're associating with vile people, okay? And I'll read Tim's question, okay, so that you can all hear him, and hear that Tim L is a young man who's decaying, and I think that we should all try to save him. So let me read his question, and we'll all try to save him together. Coach, how would a vile person go about paying off a doctor, I assume, so they can fake vaccination certification, asking for a friend since she has never done these vile things before? Forgive me if this is a poor or simple question. No, Tim, what it is it's a vile question, because you're associating with vile people who would stoop to such a thing. And I am deeply, deeply, deeply disappointed in you, Tim, you can do better. Now, I would guess that one of these vile people, these people who want to game the system, they would wait until the system for this is sort of organized. But the initial move would be, of course, to find a doctor who's a conspiracy theorist like him and thinks that the government is trying to do us harm and that the COVID vaccines are not safe. Find a sympathetic doctor initially, somebody who's plugged into the local healthcare system, who knows who's who and what's what, and develop a clear rapport with that doctor, and be very forthright, because the criminals, evil, vile people often will just be open about their vileness and their evil deeds and whatnot, and just talk to this doctor and say something along the lines of, like, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think that the government wants to hurt us and doesn't really care about us, and establish a line of communication with a doctor who knows what's what. And that doctor, once these passports get rolled out, that doctor would be in a good position to point you in the right direction and potentially set up a situation where, instead of getting an actual vaccine, you get dosed with, distilled water, and you get a certification, and thereby game the system in a very low and evil way that is totally vile and awful and just despicable and just Yeah. You know what I mean, Tim? Yeah. But you'd have to reach out to several doctors and establish very strong bonds of trust. You know, you'd need several doctors because, see, it could be that one doctor is just not very well positioned once there's a rollout of this, and some other doctor is. Okay. And you'd have to create very, very powerful bonds of trust with that doctor. Okay. So that it's really clear that nobody's going to give anybody away, you know, because most of the time a crime is discovered not because of DNA or forensic evidence or anything like that, but because one of the accomplices confesses, right? So you'd have to establish a lot of trust. Yeah. And you'd have to be willing to pay, probably, you know, because a lot of times payment is not just for the profit of the person, but also as a mechanism to establish trust, because you're showing how serious this is for you, you know. When I was like looking into the possibility of buying a respirator in March, uh, I was doing it from Amsterdam, but I was interested in getting a respirator in Ukraine, where my kids were, right? And I was in discussions with somebody, and I threw out the number. I said I'm willing to go 10,000 right off the bat, just 10,000 euros to make it happen. And the person that I approached, you know, um, and to make it clear that I was willing to do so, I tossed him 1,000 euros up front. You know, I'm willing to lose that 1,000 euros, but just so that he knew I was serious. See? And after that, then he knew I was serious, and he really made efforts. And then when I started seeing that the whole thing was not that cataclysmic or catastrophic, then I realized, okay, you know, I'm not really going to need it. And so I just wrote off the 1,000 that I tossed him his way. But the 1,000 I threw his way, it made him really aware that I was really, really serious about it. See, a lot of times when you get, when you want somebody to do something for you, it's smart to put a payment up front, so that way they know that you're not fucking around. To give you an example, I'm about to purchase a motorcycle in Germany. Yeah, and it's going to take them a year and a half to make the fucking thing. It's a handmade motorcycle. I'm not going to get into it, right? It's quite a bit of money. I already made a small deposit on it. I put 5,000 euros down for the bike. Okay, but I put those 5,000 euros down because that automatically makes it clear that I'm not fucking around, that I'm for real on this, okay? And so they're not wasting their time. I mean, imagine this motorcycle manufacturer talks to me for hours and hours, and me talking about every little thing that I want in the bike and whatnot. In the end, they say, oh, you know, I'm not going to do it. It would be a fucking waste of their time, right? And they'd be pissed off. But me depositing 5,000 euros right off the bat, you know, that will be used towards the purchase price of the bike once we're all settled on the different knickknacks and you know, accessories that the bike is going to have and whatnot. That makes it clear to them that I'm serious. I'm not fucking around. See, this is a normal course of business, especially when it's a non-traditional business. See, I mean, like for instance, when you go in to buy a new car, you know, you don't put down 5,000 bucks and then talk to the car dealer. No, you just walk in, talk to the car dealer, and figure out the options. And once it's all settled, then boom, you lay down the money, right? But in other circumstances, when it's not so traditional, not so ordinary, you as the buyer have to prove that you're serious. Now, when you're getting involved in something potentially not on the up and up, you most definitely sometimes have to put money down to make it clear that you're really serious, that you're not just bullshitting, you're not just talking. See, it's very important that you do so, because that way the other party is going to make the effort, is going to stick their neck out and do what has to get done in order to achieve the objective that you want. You see what I'm saying? Now, I want to make it really, really, really fucking clear that I am totally against any kind of illegal activity. Anybody says that I'm advocating something illegal, fuck you. I am not. Never do anything illegal. Never do anything illegal. And watch the videos I've made, you know? And what do those videos tell you? Never do anything illegal. or at least make sure you don't get caught. Yeah, never do anything illegal. And never say that you're going to do anything illegal. Never talk about doing anything illegal. You know, the fish dies by the mouth. Remember that saying. You always want to make sure that you are doing everything on the up and up, that if anybody examines what you are doing, they will never find anything wrong that you are doing. Do I make myself really, really clear? Let me put everybody's hand down and raise your hand if you are clear as to what I meant. Yeah? Okay. So do we have a quorum here that everybody's on the same page? Good. See? Look, when you start living in a totalitarian country, when you start to realize that you live in a police state, you got to figure out what is the important thing for you. And you got to figure out what are you going to do to protect your interests over those of the police states. I mean, if the police state doesn't want you to, I don't know, be chewing bubble gum and spitting it on the sidewalk, well, that's a minor inconvenience, right? You know, I love chewing bubble gum, I love spitting on the sidewalk, but the police state says don't do that. Fine, I can live with that. But if the police state starts demanding things that I cannot live with, then I have to make plans for contingencies. And I have to be willing to carry them out. And the most important thing is, see, I can't be telling the police state that I'm planning to do something. I got to do it all on my lonesome and real on the quiet, real on the down low. You see what I'm saying? See, the police state, it doesn't like it when somebody starts advertising how you can break the law. The police state doesn't like it when somebody starts encouraging people to do things that are not on the up and up. See, on the contrary, the police state comes down hard on such a person. See, so if anybody says that I'm advocating for anything illegal, I can say hand to heart that they are lying. I am not advocating anything illegal. On the contrary, I am advocating that everybody follow the letter of the law. Yeah. Okay, guys? Okay. So this has been the webinar number 40. 40, I can't believe I've done this many. And yeah, I hope that everybody got the message, the real message. Okay? I think that things will improve in 2021 for the reasons I outlined previously. But they won't. I mean, this spring, this break in the clouds, I don't think it's going to last long. Okay, and for various reasons that I'll get into in a separate webinar, I think that we'll have like a little springtime, and then we're going to get hit with a bad winter. Okay, and I'll just give you a preview of what my thinking is at this time. Okay, I think that once Biden is in power, I think that everything is going to seem to be pretty sunny. I think that he's going to be removed by the 4th of July, and we'll have Kamala Harris as the new president, and things will be fine over the summer. But come September, October, I think that there will likely be a financial crash of some sort, and that's when things are going to get really bad. That's when things are going to start to get really, really bad. That's my thinking at this time. And for a separate webinar, I'll be discussing my thinking along these lines. Okay? So, guys, it's been great as always. Do take care, and I will catch you next time.